Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us here at 4:30 on this election day, but it's also the day where the future of state government takes center stage. Right here in Madison, Governor Evers will present his budget proposal tonight, one that we know includes that nearly $500 million plan to overhaul the prison system, which includes closing GBCI by 2029. Now, earlier today, the governor providing some of the other highlights of tonight's budget address. The state, remember, has a nearly $4 billion budget surplus, not to mention a rainy day fund of nearly $2 billion. So the governor will outline his budget plan to provide nearly $2 billion in tax relief. How is he going to do that? Through a variety of methods, including eliminating sales tax on everyday items. He didn't specify what those items would be. He also wants to reduce income tax on the middle class, homeowners, renters, veterans, and seniors. He wants to eliminate income tax on tips. That's something that Republicans also want. The governor plans to incentivize local governments to freeze property taxes in return for a payment from the state. Evers is also proposing another $155 million to combat PFAS contamination. Now, these are just a few of the highlights. There will also be investments in education and agriculture and others. The question, as always, how much of this will be palatable for the GOP-led legislature, and how much of it will come down to the governor's all-powerful veto pen? For more, let's head live to Madison. For joining Jason Zimmerman, on tonight's address. Our chief political reporter is in Madison tonight to cover this and talk with local lawmakers. So, Jason, let's just start out, put a bow on that prison plan. I know you talked to some lawmakers yesterday. What are you hearing today about whether or not this will happen, specifically closing GBCI?
Well, Chris, the one thing that both sides agree on is that GBCI should be shut down, that the conditions there just are not appropriate for the inmates nor the staff. So that's one point of agreement, especially with the governor coming on board with that idea. Now, much of the disagreement is just about on everything else that's a part of the governor's plan. Now, he said that there's a series of dominoes that have to happen that allow GBCI to close. One of those is that there would be added provisions to the early release program, which a lot of Republicans are saying they're not necessarily going to go along with right now. So the other part is yesterday during a press conference, I did ask Representative David Steffen if, the quest to have a new prison built, is that something that's still on the table? He said, yes, it is. And that's the sentiment of a lot of Republicans right now, both the Assembly and the State Senate. We expect to hear a lot more about the governor's plan, specific details during his budget address later on tonight. I know the lawmakers I spoke to are eager to see if there's any any possibility of negotiations going into the next months, because this is not going to be an easy task to come to agreement on what the number of prisoners in the state should be. Right now there's 23,000 in some. The governor says we're projected to hit 24,000 by the end of the year. He wants that number to be reduced by a significant level. But the big question is, what do you do with all those people if you don't expand the provisions of early release? So there's going to be a lot of talk, a lot of back and forth between Republicans and Democrats in the next months, in the next few months on this. Hopefully there'll be an agreement before July, but a lot remains to be seen if they can, put all these pieces into place so GBI does eventually close, whether that happens in 2029 or 2031, as some Republicans have suggested the date should be, allowing more time for a new prison to be built.
All right, that's item number one. What we heard from the governor this morning, as we just talked about, that $2 billion in tax relief. Is that going to be enough to satisfy GOP legislators?
Well, it's something. I know Republicans are telling me that there had to be some kind of a tax cut in the budget for them to even begin negotiations. So it is a starting point, but I'm not sure it's quite enough. I know in talking to a lot of the Republican legislators, there's a lot of different ideas on what should happen with tax cuts. I know David Steffen, for example, says that he would like to see tax cuts to benefit people who are in retirement right now, and obviously this plan is not directed towards them. But he's looking at other things that can be done. I know other legislators have other ideas too. Some are calling for the income tax, the entire state income tax, to be wiped out, for that to not to happen. I don't think that's going to happen under Governor Tony Evers, but he is looking to give them at least something by eliminating the income tax on tips. So I think that's a starting point. Again, there's going to be a lot that changes in the months to come with this budget, and we'll see if the governor is willing to give them a little bit more or not.
Jason, one of the things we talked about with the prison is who gets to say they have a win here. Nobody wants to give the other side a win. You mentioned the sales tax, or excuse me, the income tax on tips being eliminated. That's something they both agree on. But are we going to get caught up in this? Because the last time the governor passed income tax cuts, the Republicans were all like, well, that was our idea, not his. Are we going to get caught up in this who gets credit game again?
Well, there's been a lot of political posturing. That's just the mood of things right now in Madison. It's so polarizing on both sides, wanting to give their base, their supporters, or at least make it seem to even independents, that they're the party that is working for those constituents. Now, I think what we'll see out of this is both sides proclaiming victory to some degree. I know this budget is setting the stage for the next governor's race here, and both sides would like to come out and say, we were the ones that gave tax credits to the voters when that race is out there. So I think you're going to see some of that posturing. It's just hard to determine how that's going to play out as these discussions go, and whether or not Republicans are going to get more of a tax cut than just, income tax eliminated on tips. But it would be interesting to see if they go along with that or not, and just what the mood's going to be like on the Assembly floor tonight when he speaks. You're going to see obviously Democrats cheering for just about everything, but are Republicans going to be quiet? Are they going to applaud for some of the stuff that they actually like that the governor's saying? Or is that not going to happen? I mean, what kind of mood are we going to expect, and could we hear some jeers as well?
All right, Jason, let's remind everybody, because this is just the first step, right? The governor lays out his proposal, and then it goes through a lot of processes before it ever gets in front of that all-powerful pen. So remind viewers of what the next steps are after tonight.
Yeah, Chris, it's actually a long process from here. The Joint Finance Committee is going to meet. They're going to have hearings across the state. They're going to discuss it. They're going to have to vote on a budget. Republicans have said they're going to strip out every policy issue that the governor proposes tonight. That won't even be a part of the budget. But whether or not they take some of what the governor, they take the framework and kind of move forward on that, or they propose a budget entirely of their own is what remains to be seen. But we're going to have those hearings. We're going to have that committee meet. And then beyond that, the Assembly and the Senate will have to vote on a budget. They're going to have to come together and be in agreement too. And then what we're going to see is the governor's going to have to sign it. And typically that has to happen before July. That's when the new budget would kick in. Only a few times have I seen where there hasn't been a new budget signed by July. That happened actually once when Governor Scott Walker was still in office. But unlike the federal government, there's no, freeze here on anything. The state just operates under its previous budget with the expenditures that are laid out for various departments. So the discussion will just continue past July. But ideally, everybody would like to see the budget signed into law by July 1st.
All right, Jason, thanks so much for the insight. Great point on governor's race in 2026 as well. More from Jason coming up tonight on Action 2 News at 5, 6, and after the address at 10.